from where you at. I came here for vengeance, watch your back. No need to defend, I'm on attack. Sorry they can't reply, but I guarantee they had a blast. Pop, 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 I be on the next only, yeah, I am fresh to death.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Long Haul Mentality. I am your host, as always, Nick Bagley, and this week I got my friend Austin Stout on. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Like I said, I got into Vegas early this morning, so it was 8 a.m. Vegas time, but I left at 7 a.m. Texas time. So I flew for 3 hours, and it was only an hour forward in time.
So by the time people see this, they'll already have the results of the show.
Yeah. We'll be past the Olympia because I've got one with Jarrett Crew going up tomorrow, and then yours will be the week after. So yeah, it'll be cool, man. But it was good to see you a couple of weeks ago with Paul and his wife out this way.
Yeah, I bumped into several people at the gym at Destination, which makes sense, I guess.
Tends to happen that way.
A lot of people train there, I suppose. I suppose that's kind of a hub for that type of thing, right?
Yeah, right. First time you and I got to meet in person. You know, we did did a short mentorship with you a long time ago, but it was nice to finally get to meet you in person.
Yeah, and Paul was putting me through kettlebell circuit.
Oh, yeah, dude. I was watching that, and I was tired just watching you guys do it.
My form broke down a little bit at the end, but I did okay.
Yeah, it broke down at the beginning, the middle, and the end, right? Yeah. He was trying to get a bodybuilder to twist. What do you think he's going to do?
Yeah, and I can imagine. I'm not the most flex, but I used to be years of wrestling, so used to be very limber.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Very flexible. Yeah, so I'm not terrible. It could be worse.
Yeah, it is funny because I feel like us as bodybuilders would do really good having a lot more rotational stuff and going in different planes other than just forward and side to side. But we never see any bodybuilders do that stuff. You know, I mean, it's just because it's not the sexy thing to do. You know.
Yeah, not really. And now, especially because now everyone's very focused on training in stabilized positions, right? Everything's about stability. So it's like we're moving minimally.
It's so interesting it's always funny to watch the younger generations and the things that they latch onto, because it's I remember when I went through that phase of everything's got to be the most stable thing ever. But the problem for me is you end up setting up a piece of equipment for fucking 30 minutes just trying to get it set the way you want, you know?
Yeah, there's got to be a middle ground there too. And with training, with training at home and training in the barn, it's get a little crafty sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a nice little setup in there. You've got how much actual equipment and space do you have in there?
I think, and don't quote me on this, I think that the building is, so basically I have a pole barn that was that had a lean-to on it. So I bought this house from my parents, and my dad had a camper parked in there. So it's very tall ceilings, right? And I had the front of that lean-to enclosed, and that's what I put the gym in there. And I want to say, cool. I want to say it's at least 1,000 square feet. I think it's a little more than that.
For a home gym, that's perfectly fine.
1,200 square feet. I mean, 1,200 square feet is like a small house for some people.
Yeah. I mean, where do you live?
I'm in Central Ohio, so I always use Columbus as a point of reference because people know where the Arnold Classic is.
Right.
Probably 25 miles from that. I'm up the freeway. I mean, I'm rural. It's rural here, but we're very close to major freeways and,
Well, that gym's got to be getting fucking cold in there. You putting space heaters in there?
So I have, it gets cold. It gets hot too. The heat is probably worse than the cold, if I'm being honest. I have one of those torpedo heaters that's kerosene or diesel that puts out a lot of heat. And then I have a couple little space heaters I plug in the back. Most of the winter, it's okay, but there's a stint when it gets really cold. It's very humid in Ohio too, right? So in the winter, there's still moisture. People don't realize the humidity is still there.
Ew.
right? So I remember last winter, it was so cold and there was moisture that I went out there and all the metal was covered in frost. Like the whole thing, the whole gym, all the dumbbells, all the plates, the whole thing was frosted over.
You got to walk around with a hair dryer and dry it
Dude,
all
it looked
off.
like some like super villain went in there and just went just like covered.
Mr. Freeze came in and fucked up your pump.
I rode on I wrote on my cable stack, like my selectorized cable stack. I could like write messages on it in the
That's
frost.
crazy. No, thank you, bro. I mean, living in Texas, like I'm very much used to a hot gym at this point. You know, like
Yeah.
I mean, most of the gyms, like if they have AC, it does okay. But like in the summer, there's not much you can do to make those places bearable. You know,
Well, the
and
humidity,
most of
I'm telling you, the humidity
oh,
is the thing though, because at least
it's
air
so bad.
conditioning pulls. You don't guys don't have a lot of humidity, but in
Right.
Ohio, if you're inside
Oh,
an
yes, we do.
AC, well,
Oh,
it
yes, we
pulls
do.
the humidity out. The AC does,
Right.
right?
Right.
Whereas it's a lot drier. Whereas here, it's like a swamp.
Yeah, you're just blowing around sticky air.
Yeah, but
But my girlfriend actually lives in Houston, and there is a noticeable difference when I drive from Dallas to Houston in the middle of summer. Like there is a dramatic increase
really,
in the
okay,
humidity
that
once I
makes
go out there.
sense.
Yeah, but by like a noticeable, like the temperature might be about the same, but it's going to feel a good 20 degrees hotter in Houston just because the humidity is just, you walk outside and it's like you've got a sticky blanket on you.
Yep, that's pretty much here.
Yeah, right. But so, anyways, man, to get into the topic of conversation today, we kind of already touched on it before this to kind of give you an idea of what I wanted to discuss. But I had this thought the other day because one of my clients came to me and we've been working on improving his gut and improving his liver. There was some like inflammation stuff that was that was stemming from gut dysbiosis. It was causing some inflammation in his liver, causing distension, that kind of thing. So he goes to his doctor, and his doctor just blanketly throws out, "Oh, you have a cortisol problem."
Okay.
And when he said that to me, I was like, "Does your doctor have anything to back this up? Does your doctor have any information to prove that you have an issue with cortisol?" And he had nothing. Not even a generic lab work where they drew cortisol and you could see the things there. So my thought process started to go is like you hear people talk about cortisol a lot, and I feel like cortisol has a really bad reputation, and people just don't get what it is. So I want to get to like the realities of what cortisol actually is, how it affects people, and what we can do to improve it. So let's start at like the bare bones basic. What is cortisol?
So cortisol it's a hormone technically, right? It's an adrenal hormone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Cortisol it has a lot of in our space, we think of cortisol, I'll break it down. We think of it as a stress hormone, right? Which it is. It's released in response to a stressor, acute or chronic. But cortisol actually has some other regulatory mechanisms or responsibilities so it's anti-inflammatory, for example. That's one of the things that it does. It can also be inflammatory. So it can go both ways. It's a very much a regulatory hormone. Now, cortisol is a hormone that is accompanied with, when it's released, it's generally accompanied with things like adrenaline, right? Or norepinephrine, maybe dopamine, like excitatory neurochemicals. So think of it as a hormone that prepares you for a bout of stress, right? Now, it can also be, so that's more of on the side that we generally think of it of. We think of it in that vein, right? But it can also be accompanied with like some of these inflammatory conditions that we look at, right? Where we start to run into issues with it is if there's too much or too little, obviously. So when you think of it in the stress in the stress aspect, cortisol is going to help you cope. That's the word I would use. It helps you cope with the stress. If you don't have enough of it, your stress resilience may be very low. Okay, and we'll talk about what that actually means. Like, what does that actually look like? If you have too much of it, then you may feel some of those excitatory aspects that come with it. You may feel a bit overstimulated, perhaps. And then you get into like the water retention and, water balance and all that, because with cortisol being an adrenal hormone, it's generally, when it's higher, aldosterone levels are generally elevated. So you have sodium and water retention. That's like, you think like peaking for shows and stuff, right? When it's low, you'll have sodium and water excretion because aldosterone levels drop lower, right? So yes, if you have a cortisol issue, I guess, and that's a super blanket term, but if you have a high cortisol, for example, yeah, you might retain fluid. You might also feel anxious. You might also feel, overstimulated. You might also have issues sleeping, like any number of things. Now, I think where we fail to understand and fail to like recognize its role is most people just assume that if they are stressed that their cortisol is high. That's the first mistake. Yep. And maybe they don't, and like you said, they probably don't even have any data to back it. Like so there's another mistake. Best case scenario, we have like a fasted AM cortisol on serum blood work, which, you know what, it's better than nothing. If you're going to test something like that, I basically throw it on every lab because we're already in there. So we might as well do it. As long as you're getting it checked within maybe like a couple hours of waking up, you'll get an idea of what that waking response is going to be like, right?
Going to take a quick break from the podcast to bring a few things to your attention. First off, as I was going through the YouTube analytics, I noticed that almost 70% of my watchers are not subscribed. So if you're watching this right now, please do me a favor and click that subscribe button. Every single time I get a new subscriber, comments, likes, and shares, this helps spread the podcast more, and I really, really appreciate you guys. This podcast has no paid sponsorships, so the best way for you to support my channel is to support my sponsors. So Labrada Pro Series is my supplement sponsor. We have a full line of products with some new ones coming. The pre-workout is on the way right now, and the new Labrada Nutrition RTD pre-workout is about to hit the market as well. On top of Labrada Pro Series, I also have Gasp and Better Bodies, and then I also have Authentic Aminos. Please go support these companies. Use my code BAGLEY10 for Labrada Pro Series, BAGLEY15 for Gasp and Better Bodies, and Bagley for Authentic Aminos. Thanks, guys. Let's get back to the podcast.
So it's not a bad marker to put on there. It's shaky at best, though. You wait too long, it's going to already have fallen off. It's going to be lower, give you inaccurate readings. So, of course, you test any other time of day, it's generally not going to be accurate. So when we're looking at this, I think the very first thing we should do is maybe realize what the different characteristics of how would you feel if you had a high cortisol or a low cortisol, and what kind of things you would see. So you have no data. Let's say you've got like no blood work. Get some blood work. There's a good start. But
Yeah.
You don't. But maybe you don't have anything.
But before we get further into that and start going into the specifics with blood work and testing and stuff, let's run it back to the cortisol levels, right? Because I think another thing that people will start to get a little bit confused on is sometimes high and low cortisol almost come across similarly. Sure. Right? There's a lot of things that it's like, it's kind of hard to tell. Is it low? Is it high? So what are some of the number one indicators that, like, before you've tested somebody, before they start to have these issues and you have the real data, how do you start to determine that it is specifically a cortisol problem?
Well, first off, it's almost never specifically a cortisol problem because that's indirectly responding to something else, right? So let's keep that in mind first. It's kind of like in fact, it's kind of like a lot of things we look at. Thyroid doesn't just stop working by itself generally, Yeah. Or yeah. Another great one is that I talk about with people often is like mast cell activation or histamine or the inflammatory response. These are all responses, right? What are they responding to? That's the
Yeah.
first question. So when you're looking at cortisol, we have these two camps where we may be high, we may be low. You would feel very similar. You feel very similar effects of that because the driver is stressed. So you're going to feel stressed and you're going to feel tired, probably. Now, if we're getting on the extreme ends of high and the extreme ends of low, that's where you might start to feel differences. We could talk about maybe what those numbers and stuff might look like. But
Yeah, 100%.
on the extreme ends of high, again, you might feel tired but wired, like an anxiousness that's not, it's not like a productive stimulation. It's kind of like a scattered stimulation that feels very chaotic, right? That you're very uneasy. Your chest is hurting. You're like, this is not good. So it's not a locked in focus type of thing, right? Now, of course, with that, there's also probably some adrenaline in the background. You might have some increase in like other excitatory neurochemicals like glutamate. You may have lower amounts of inhibitories like GABA, maybe serotonin. So there's a lot of things that are imbalanced, but you're probably going to feel tired, but also I can't sleep. That type of thing. It's like, well, I can't sleep, but damn, I'm tired. Right.
Yep. So what range, before we go into the low, what range would that be in? Would you start to be like, all right, you're on the high end of this with cortisol?
So I like that question because one thing that I see a lot is that people nitpick this. And so if you're getting serum labs done, if you're using like typical US ranges, I would say that if you're testing it within a couple hours of waking to get a good idea, maybe anywhere from like 12 to 17, 12 to 18 would be fine. But listen, if it's 1 or 2 points higher on either end and you feel good, it's okay. I get a lot of people and they're like, well, I'm at a 19. I said, well, first off, I would rather you be at a 19 than a 5. Right? I would much rather you be a little bit on the high end than chronically low. At least we know your body's reacting. Like, we need to figure out maybe why is it reacting, but at least we know that your system is working, right? I mean, that's much more promising than being completely bottomed out. So to that point, yeah, maybe somewhere in that range. And again, it's going to be variable depending on when you're testing it. And you could test it today and test it again tomorrow and get 2 different readings. If you hate getting poked with needles and you're going in to get your blood work done, it might jump up. Right? Like, that's just the nature of it. So you have to take into account maybe what was your morning like? How did you sleep the night before? Things like that. Now, what I will say about that though, is that if you're seeing chronically elevated levels, you get like a 25, dude, I've seen 30s, 40s, stuff like that. First off, if you're getting in the 40s or 50s, we might want to go to an endocrinologist to make sure we don't have any pituitary tumors. But let's say that you don't. Those types of things are chronic issues. I don't care what your morning was like. Those are likely going to be a chronic stress problem. Most people by that point most people don't ever get that high. They generally crash out before they ever manage to go that high with levels. But on the low end, basically anything under what I said, if you're getting into the single digits, it's probably low. I mean, there's some other things that we can talk about that I would want to also look at to kind of verify that. Making sure that they're testing it at the right time. Obviously, symptomology, like how do you feel? But I also like to, on basic blood work, there's some other things you can look at on basic serum labs that can be helpful. One is electrolytes. Electrolytes is a sneaky one. Super easy thing you guys can look at. Think about this. If you have very high levels of cortisol or high adrenal drive, you'll have higher aldosterone. So you think sodium to potassium ratio would be high on the labs. If you're bottomed out, potassium to sodium ratio would be high, right? You can see that. And again, it normally has to be fairly bad before you're starting to see like potassium's out of range or something. Most people aren't getting that bad, but sometimes. But yeah, if you see potassium at like a 5, and your sodium's, 132, it's like at the bottom of the range, and then your cortisol's like a 6, you're pretty burnt out at that point. Or maybe it's the opposite, right? Maybe it's like the opposite type of ratio. And you can also, not directly cortisol related, but usually the immune system markers can give you some indications there too. Like if you're in that kind of really burnout state, you're probably going to have low white blood cells. Most likely, you may see some of the inflammatory markers getting higher and higher because you have that inability to control inflammation as well, right? So you're seeing that manifest.
And now that's with both low and high?
So yeah, now especially with the low, because as you get lower and lower like that, your ability to control inflammation, because you don't have that cortisol, it gets in the low white blood cells, like your ability to control the inflammation is getting worse, right? It's like inflammatory response is normal. Well, you need it, right? You need it for training, you need it for injury, you need it for, you get a pathogen in your gut, something, like your body's got to be able to respond to that, right? It's just that we should have a counter regulatory response. Inflammation should not be chronic, it should be acute, right? So you tend to see, at least in my experience, and again, there's always variability, but you tend to see that kind of chronic higher inflammation, lower white blood cells, that type of stuff with the people that are a little more on the low cortisol end, because usually that means they've been there longer. It normally is a problem that takes longer to manifest. It's not something that most people don't just go to normal and drop. There's probably a period where it was elevated for a while, and then it has, since fallen off.
Burnt out. Yeah. When you're looking at just like a regular blood draw, are you also pulling DHEA and kind of seeing what that balance looks like between the two to see what's going on with the adrenal glands, or what are you specifically looking for in a regular lab work like that? Let's talk basic labs, and then we'll go into more detailed stuff later.
Yep. You'll see. So there's probably 4 to 5 markers you can look at. It's like, if you meet 3 to 5 of the criteria, you probably have this. Like, you can kind of think of it in that vein, right? So DHEA or DHA sulfate probably is what's going to be on there. DHAS. Electrolytes you could use. Another sneaky one in there is your glucose and insulin levels. I'll talk about why that might matter. Obviously cortisol itself, and then probably white blood cell counts. Again, you always have to look at context though. So like, for example, if someone is in the middle of an active infection, their white blood cells are going to be high. So like, you have to remember certain things like that. But yeah, DHEA levels could be elevated with your higher cortisol people. They might be suppressed with your lower cortisol folks. Like, that's not uncommon to see. Same thing with glucose, because you think, how does glucose regulate itself in between feedings or while you're sleeping? Well, cortisol's adrenal glands are involved in that to some extent, right? They have to release some adrenaline, they release some cortisol. Some of this signaling is getting to like the liver or the muscle tissue maybe, and releasing glucose into the bloodstream, because otherwise you'd go into a coma while you slept, probably, right? So you might actually see people have very low insulin levels or even low glucose levels when they're very burnt out, when they have those low cortisol levels. You see these people and you're like, man, and I'm not talking about like contest prep peeled, where you're like very ultra insulin sensitive, just in a general sense. But like, wow, your insulin's a 1.9, your glucose is like a 70. And I've seen stuff like that, and they're eating like 500 grams of carbs.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, wait a second. That does not add up.
This isn't adding up.
I mean, 500 is an arbitrary number, but obviously,
right.
But yeah, you will occasionally see people that are in that type of situation, and they are chronically burnt out, to the point where some people have hypoglycemic issues. They're feeling like hypos randomly between meals. They wake up in the middle of the night a lot, which is often just that blood sugar dip and that correction that you're getting from it, right? So they're waking up like hungry, and they're waking up like maybe even alert. That people, they're like, dude, I wake up and I feel my heart rate, or I feel, it's elevated, or I feel like I'm kind of stimulated, or I can't. It's not like I wake up and then fall right back to sleep type of thing. That can be blood sugar and cortisol irregularities, dipping and spiking in the night, because your body doesn't want to let you die. You got to wake you back up.
Yep. And I think just to touch on that before we move past it, I think it's very important to make sure that people understand that cortisol, just like it's the same conversation with estrogen, cortisol is not the enemy, right? It's not the enemy, and that's the way it gets treated with a lot of things. Like, oh, you have a cortisol problem, take this cortisol product to lower your cortisol. When maybe your problem is that you have low cortisol, right? It's people just like seeing a product that's getting sold by their favorite company, and they're like, yeah, I'm a little stressed out, I could use that. And then they use it chronically, and now they have a problem with cortisol the other direction. It's like, well, no, you need cortisol to live and survive, right? So if you have someone who, now we have labs, we have all the markers, we have the things that we see, and they have a dysregulation, either high or low or whatever. What's going to be one of the first courses of action that you take to start managing that, versus just like cortisol's high, directly go after cortisol?
Yeah. So you bring up a great point. We can talk about supplementation too, but I would say don't throw a bunch of cortisol managing supplements at it, big, high or low, unless you actually know what you're looking at. And I'm not talking about taking like ashwagandha. I mean, yes, that can have some minimal lowering effects in some people, but I see the exact scenario that you're talking about, where they come in and they're like, yeah, I've been stressed. I suspected it was a cortisol issue. So I've been taking this product that is, used to reduce it. And it's been reducing it. Like, yeah, well, this is why you feel terrible. And also even just the timing,
Yep.
of when they're taking things. They're like, well, I take this cortisol reduction supplement as soon as I get up in the morning. I'm like, well, dude, your morning cortisol is already low. Like, or how tired are you? So regardless, the the ironic thing about this is the main thing to correct high and low is the same. It is that you have to figure out where the stress, what is the stressor, right?
Yep.
Like, I know that that's such a broad recommendation, but I think that the most important thing to keep in mind there is that generally if you're very suppressed and burnout, that probably is a longer term, more chronic issue. If it's higher, then it maybe hasn't been there quite as long. I guess that's probably like the most rudimentary way to describe it.
Sure.
Everyone's resilience is different though.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's resilience is drastically different. And when we talk about stress, we really have to conceptualize the fact that it is so many things that go into it, right? It is physical. It is your training. It is your cardio. It is your job. It is all these things. But I can confidently say that even if you aren't overstepping on those things like the training, and even if you're sleeping, 7 or 8 hours a night, you can still have very high cortisol or very low cortisol if your emotional and psychological stress is high enough. I see it all the time. Like, well, I'm only training, 4 days a week or 3 days a week, and I'm, everything's like 3 to 4 RAR and all this stuff, and I'm taking XYZ supplement, so on and so forth. Like, yeah, but you're batshit crazy. And it's like, I think that people don't actually understand just how much of an effect that can have
Yep.
on that dysregulation. It's kind of like the the micro stressors are generally what's accumulative because they're not quantitative, right? You can't quantitate, you can't, there's not a number behind them. You can't see them. Half the time you don't really even recognize them because it's just the state that you're used to living in, right? It's an automatic thing. So in our space, common scenario is they don't feel great. They probably have some, irregularities in cortisol, whatever. They start going out. They go down gigantic rabbit holes on Reddit or Chat GPT. And guess what happens? It gets worse because they start throwing everything under the sun at it, or they're like, ooh, that's probably this. And you match like 10 different symptomologies of, 10 different problems, right? Because when you look at a lot of problems, they share a similar symptomology, we did a podcast about this recently, and I thought it was funny that I don't get on Reddit that much, but the guy I was doing the podcast with, Joe, he said, if you ever look at the subreddits, all the symptoms in the different subreddits are the same. So people are like going from one to the other and commiserating with each other in the subreddits. And so, by the time you spend 2 hours there, you have everything. We're not talking about being a hypochondriac, though. That's a different.
Yeah. It's such an interesting thing because, like, I feel like, especially the day and age that we live in, of like everyone has a product to sell, is that the first thing that people want to do is go, oh, you have a cortisol problem. I have this product that can help you with that. When the reality of regulating cortisol is often just, let's work on the stressors that are in your life, right? Like, there are certain stressors that we're not going to be able to get rid of. Like, if you have a stressful job, you can't just stop going to your job, right? If you have a stressful relationship, like, it's not like you're just going to leave and it's like, all right, everything's better, right? Like, there's a lot of things that are out of our control. But that means if we are at the same time also doing training 5-6 days a week, not taking any rest days on cardio, not giving yourself adequate amounts of food and letting yourself kind of reset, especially if you're in a diet, that kind of thing, like, that can be extremely detrimental. And then even like your circadian rhythm being dysregulated, I think, is probably your number one place to focus on first and foremost. Is, do you get sun first thing in the morning? Are you getting vitamin D? Are you getting sun in your eyes? Are you getting blue light out of your eyes when you're going to sleep? Are you allowing your body to actually release melatonin versus just going, let me take 5 milligrams of melatonin before I go to sleep? It's like, these really simple things that are really low hanging fruits, that's not a sexy thing to sell, actually end up working a lot better than a lot of these cortisol products that you end up seeing on the market. Is that kind of similar to where you would go?
I totally agree. I posted about sleep today. I posted like this 5 or 6 screenshots of my sleep scores. And I actually put a disclaimer on there that if you can't handle the data, then don't track your sleep scores, because don't hyperfixate. And I actually said that I personally am not really attached to the sleep score. I mainly use my Ring for step tracking. But I was kind of talking about that I use them too. I've tried some different things to see what effects it has. And some things, some things do have effects, like if you train later in the day versus training in the middle of the day or training in the morning, or if you eat really close to bed, like, do those things have an effect on your scores? And they can. But what I know and what I've found over and over and over again is exactly what you said. If I get up and go to bed around a similar time every day, weekends might vary, but try to keep the variance minimal, right? If you do that, if you regulate your light exposure, morning, less at night, we have actually put in our house, we actually put like the old, like, incandescent bulbs in most of our lights. They are not as bright as the LEDs, but dude, it's way better. Like, at night, you don't just feel like your head doesn't feel as heavy. And I've been looking at screens all day. I put my blue light blockers on at night. I do something relaxing at night. And when I say relaxing, dude, I am not the person that is, doing some super elaborate routine. I literally put my blue light blockers on and I do something mindless. I watch TV for 30 minutes. You know what happens? I fall asleep.
Yep. Yep.
And it's really not complicated. On the weekends, it's ironic because on the weekends, if it's like 10:30, I automatically get tired. That is the circadian rhythm thing. I mean, if I need to push through it to do something, I can, but I'm automatically like, my body's like, hey, 10:30.
Hey man, what are we doing?
My fiance jokes with me because sometimes I'll fall asleep on the couch and I'll like move around and I'll wake up and say, it's time to go to bed. She's like, it's 10:01. It's 9:59. It is 10:05. I said, I'm regulated. I always know.
My girlfriend gives me shit all the time because like my house is just dark at night. It's just the lights are off. Like I'm fumbling around in the dark. It's like I've gotten to a point where I can see pretty well in the dark. You know, it's getting harder as I get older.
Like,
but
yeah,
just kind of always done that. You know, and not even purposefully of like, oh, it's my circadian rhythm. It's just kind of how things were at my house growing up as a kid. It's what I'm used to. But I think the things that we have at our disposal that are literally free, like the sun and going to bed at a normal time, people just want to believe that it's not true. They want to just like attach onto, well, no, I have a problem, so I have to take something. It's like, that's not always the case. Sometimes less is more, and a more simpler situation will actually be what puts us in the right position, you know? Now, those things aside, we talked about those. How much of an effect does a gut functioning well play into cortisol?
It matters for a few reasons. One is that anything hormonal, I know that's very broad because there's sex hormones, there's thyroid hormones, there's all these things. Anything hormonal probably will be at least somewhat affected by your gut, just because it is a detox hub, right? It is part of that kind of liver detox chain. You think we have phase 1 and phase 2 liver detox, but we have a phase 3 in a sense. We have elimination, right? Gut, urine, or like bowels, urine, right? Which is, so yeah, I mean, it will affect hormone metabolism to some extent. It's also going to affect obviously inflammatory levels. So if you have a greater need for inflammation control, you might see cortisol respond to that indirectly, right? So yeah, it definitely makes a difference. And plus, I would just say that if your gut's a wreck all the time and you don't feel good, you're probably more stressed. It's probably part of the reason you got there, and you're stressed about the fact that you don't feel good. Your stress resilience, I used that word earlier, is generally not as good. And defining that term, when you are very burnt out, so these are low cortisol folks, are insufficiency type folks, the ability to respond to stress is very, very poor. So when you have very low cortisol, or you're not getting this like a dopaminergic response, there's very little arousal response to things. What you generally feel like is everything feels like an inconvenience. It's hard to respond to stuff. You might get irritated, or like, whoa, wait, like, why do I feel like this is bothering me so much? It should just be kind of a minor inconvenience, but you almost feel this inability to actually cope with the stress because you don't have the resources, right? So when you add something like a gut issue on top of it, yeah, it's going to have a fairly profound effect. And most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, if you have irregularities in your cortisol level that are extreme, you're probably going to have something else. If not now, you will eventually, right? And it's probably going to be a gut issue. It's probably going to be, low sex hormones, loss of menstrual cycle, whatever it is. So I think that the thing you should always keep in mind is that it is a first line response to a stress. The second things in that chain are going to be other portions of the endocrine system and other portions of the gut, other portions of the lymphatic system. Like those are the things that are going to start breaking down after that, right?
Mhm.
I'm not talking a day, I'm not talking a week. Like, you go to the Olympia, you don't get enough sleep, you maybe eat some different stuff, whatever, you get home, you have diarrhea for 2 days. I don't know if that'll happen. Let's just say that
I
it
hope
did.
not.
Right. But let's just say that it did. That's okay. It'll normalize, right? The last thing you want to do is freak out. The last thing you want to do is
Mhm.
assume there's a problem, because things like what we're talking about, they're not acute stressors. It's very normal to feel acute stressors, to feel the effects of those. That's a normal thing. There's nothing wrong with you. But it's when you start getting into that place where your stress resilience is very, very low. That's a word that I use with clients a lot, and that's something I try to help them gauge, because that is a very good indicator of how they're healing, and how they're feeling, and how they're functioning. If they what they start to feel is that the things that were bothering me before, coworkers, I don't know, whatever it is, I'm not getting as bent out of shape about it. I'm not feeling
Mhm.
I'm not feeling the same response or the same frustration. Part of that can be some therapy might be needed in there as
Yep.
well. Um, that's another rabbit hole. But there's a very real non-quantitative thing, which is this idea of resilience. So
Yep.
another example would be, you have a bad night of sleep. Fine. That shouldn't put you out for 3 days. That shouldn't put you out. Maybe it'll put you out for a couple days, but it shouldn't put you out for a week. Like, you shouldn't, if
Right.
you have a digestive disturbance, like, you shouldn't be like, awesome, my digestion was off for 2 weeks after I went to the Olympia. I'm like, well, did you eat at the buffet the whole time? They're like, no, I ate all my meals. I was like, well, dude, that's not, your
Something's
resilience
wrong. Yep.
is
Yep.
low.
Yep. It's such an important point to make there, is that, like, I feel like people are expecting, when you say that they have a cortisol problem, they're expecting, like, oh, my cortisol needs to be perfect all the time and I shouldn't be, like, all over the place. But it's like, the reality of it is, cortisol is going to go up and down. That's the point of it. It's
Right.
supposed to be high at certain parts of the day. It's supposed to be low at certain parts of the day. It's just when we start to have it be low when it's supposed to be high, or vice versa, or it's just high all the time or low all the time. That's the biggest issue. So, like, just feeling like you have to pop a supplement every time you're stressed out is like, guys, you need to learn how to control it. You need to learn how to, like, take a moment and step back from whatever it is that is stressing you. And that's the number one line of defense that I give to clients on a regular basis. They start telling me they're stressed out. I'm like, okay, sit down, take a step back, take some deep breaths, and focus. First, let everything go, and then figure out what you can control, right? Focus on what you can control. If you can't control anything at all, let it go, and then just let it be, right? You can't control it, so stop trying, because you're only going to make the situation worse. So, like, I know you said kind of that range of generic levels for cortisol is like 12 to 17, I think 12 to 16, I think you
Yeah,
said,
somewhere in there.
somewhere in that ballpark. Um, so obviously within a particular range, what should a normal person's curve look like? Like, it doesn't have to be specific numbers, but what does
Yeah.
that look like on a normal daily basis?
So that circadian rhythm that you're talking about, within circadian rhythm, a lot of things are circadian based. Hunger is circadian based to a large extent. Um, Cortisol is circadian based. Hormones are somewhat circadian based. So what you're talking about there is, we should have a waking response, and that waking response starts before you're actually awake. It's starting to actually rise during the later stages of your sleep. And then as you wake up and you get moving, it will go up for a period of time. Maybe that's a couple hours, 1 or 2 hours, somewhere in that general vicinity. It will taper slowly, and then it will kind of fall off at night before bed. So if anyone's ever seen the Dutch test, that's an example. They have a graph on there. It's like, boop, kind of goes down like that. you there can be some differences in there. If, for example, you trained in the afternoon, there could be like a blip on there, right? Like something like that. those are acute differences. But yeah, higher in the earlier in the day, lower later in the day. And when you see dysregulation, I mean, you can see all kinds of different patterns. I mean, I've seen everything. I've seen zero. I've seen flat, nothing. That's not, you don't want to be there. That's not fun. Been there before. You see flat, you see flip-flop patterns where it's like low in the morning and goes up at night. That's not a fun one either. You know, you could see any number of things happen there. And a lot of it is, again, to your point, is based on circadian habits, is based on circadian rhythm. I mean, you can regulate a lot of the pattern itself by those actual habits that we were talking about earlier. And then, of course, you know, stress management is going to come into play beyond that. Now, there are some other things that can kind of go into that a little bit. For most people that are functioning fairly normally, not a lot is going to make a huge impact acutely for them. Like I said, having a bad night of sleep, whatever it is. Part of the, like, I posted that thing about my sleep scores today. If I have a bad sleep score, I wake up, I'm like, wow, whatever, like, what am I going to do? You know, if I feel like total crap, then yes, maybe I'll like adjust my training for the day or something. But I mean, beyond that, so what? That's kind of the attitude you have to have, is when you have a bad day or you have an acute stressor, or you have an acute issue, so what? Move on. I even said that, I've said that to clients in updates before. They're like, well, this happened yesterday. I'm like, so what? Yeah. What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
And then what?
Yeah.
Like, what do you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, prime example. I mean, I was up till 11 last night, and I got up at 3:30 this morning. You know, to fly out here to Vegas, and then as soon as I got here, it's been ground running. I'm like, I'm very tired right now, but it's like I still have things to do. And it's like it is what it is. You just got to keep moving forward. You can let it kick you down, and you complain, but my cortisol, or you can just be a human and fucking deal with it. You know, but
you're not going to do that all the time,
right? Exactly. Now, let's give a scenario of like someone who has a regulated cortisol and has like a normal like wave as they should, with things that can affect cortisol and like spike it. What types of increases are actually happening? And then how quickly do those spikes tend to happen? Like a lot of times you'll hear people be like, oh, I spiked my cortisol really hard. So what does that look like? Is it something that does actually happen that fast, or is it something that kind of takes time to build up and go high from these stressors?
It can move up pretty quick. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, it's like 5 minutes. It just largely depends on how much of a stressor we're inputting there, but it can definitely move up fairly quick. I gave the example of you're anxious driving to LabCorp to get your labs done, that type of thing. I mean, that's a fairly acute response. Training is an acute cortisol response every time. I mean, it should be. In fact, if your cortisol doesn't rise when you're training, you're probably not going to have a great session. You're probably not going to get much arousal response from that, right? Yes, acute stressors can have a fairly quick response. I mean, we're talking not instantaneously, but I mean, pretty close. I mean, pretty close to it. But also the decrease or the decline is also fairly instantaneous. Like, it's depending on how quickly how you're responding to the situation. So if you are, someone slams on their brakes in front of you in the car and your heart rate jumps, yeah, your cortisol went up like that. But also as you drive down the road and you're like, what a dumbass, you know, and you like, hopefully don't scream the rest of the way to work. It's going to be back down by the time you get there, as long as you respond appropriately and it's not lingering. That's where, you know, that's where stress is besides people lack awareness. That's always like the first step, is we actually have to be aware of what it is that's stressing you.
Yeah.
But the second thing is that this idea of getting rid of it is a pipe dream. Like, that doesn't exist. That's not a thing. you can't really do that. I mean, yes, if there's some toxic things in your life that you're trying to improve and get rid of, you absolutely should. But
Yeah.
yeah, you absolutely should. Those will probably make a pretty profound difference in your life. But it should more so be improving perception and response than trying to eliminate something.
Right.
So a
Yeah.
great example would be if you do different like modulating tools. So if you journaled, if that's something you like to do, that's not really my jam. I've done it on and off. It's not my thing necessarily. But if you did that and that's kind of like a distraction, it helps you put your thoughts out there, that's fine. That might not necessarily help you when your coach gets pissed off at you and you're really upset.
Yeah.
That's a response. It's called exposure therapy. So like exposure therapy is, being put in a situation and then kind of learning how to respond to it by virtue of being put in it. Most of us just need to get better at that type of thing. So it's not that you won't get stressed. It's just that you got to let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to let it go. Dude, I get stressed all the time. Happens. It just does. I get frustrated. I've got this pen here. See how it's crooked? That's because I've bent it so many times. This is my stress pen.
That's your cortisol indicator?
It's like steel, dude. I can't break it. I can't even break it.
I'm going to pause it for just a second. I have a couple more questions. I just need to pee really bad.
You're fine. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. Spike my own cortisol, hold my own pee. But yeah, I think that part that you said there is probably one of the most important aspects that people can take away from this is like, you just got to let it go and learn how to cope with stress, learn how to cope with stressors and like I said just a minute ago, separate from it when you can. Just take a step back from it. There's going to be times where you can't step away from it. It just is what it is. That's called being an adult. But learning how to like put things, it's not like you have to have some crazy long meditative process. It's like sometimes all it takes is a couple of deep breaths and go, cool, what's my next step? And that's it. Because we've all been through very highly stressful situations where like you feel like the world's coming to an end and then not that long later, you've completely forgotten about it, right? It's like the faster you can shift into that position of like, I can't change it. It is what it is. Let me keep moving forward. The better your type of response you're going to have.
And that's all anyone can do.
Yeah. So we touched on it fairly quickly, but if you're really trying to figure out somebody's issues with cortisol, is a Dutch test kind of the direction you're going to go with that?
Yeah, it's not something I use super frequently, but if you're getting into some of those more intensive situations, it can be helpful just because it'll give you substantially more data. So for example, it can give you the actual pattern throughout the day. We can see levels of cortisone and cortisol. We talk about like what cortisone is a little bit different. So that it can give you that molecule as well. It can also show you organic acids, which it can show you, which are metabolites of something. So it's a urine test, right? So it's the end product is coming out in your urine. So you can get metabolites of like dopamine and epinephrine. So I like on the Dutch test, one thing I can do too is if I'm seeing kind of a borderline situation where I'm like, this looks a little bit low, they're kind of presenting that symptomology. And then I go down to the bottom and I can see, oh, dopamine metabolites below range, epinephrine metabolites below range. You're like, yeah, kind of a confirmation that yes, we're not getting into an excitatory state at all. We're pretty bottomed out. So on that Dutch test, like I said, it will give you free cortisol levels, which like other hormones, there is a binding protein. So there's CBG, right? You've heard of SHBG. There is sex hormone binding globulin. There's thyroxine binding globulin for thyroid. There's CBGs, cortisol binding globulin. So it can give you free levels, which don't make up, it's like 1, 2, 3% of the total. And then it can give you total levels, which the total levels that are coming out is a combination of everything, like the cortisol, the cortisone, bound, unbound, all of it. So you can get an idea of your free levels, and you can get an idea of the total levels, which shows you maybe it's just high partially because we have a detox issue, maybe like the liver and the gut. So maybe we're seeing some lingering from that. Some people occasionally will preference cortisol over cortisone. Cortisone is similar. It's just less active. It's just basically a far less active form. So we have something called 11 beta HSD. So it's an enzyme that'll kind of dictate how much of that cortisol or cortisone is converted into cortisol, and then vice versa. I believe there's an A and a B, or a 1 and a 2. Like one of them pushes it into cortisone and one of them pushes it into cortisol. There's two different subtypes of that. So some people will preference cortisone very heavily. So they have enough production going on, but so much of it is being shuttled over into cortisone that they're not really feeling the effects of the cortisol. So we see this, more in people like women that have PCOS. Like androgens can affect this. Believe it or not, some of the androgens that have like some of the drying effects, like trenbolone, like some of this glucocorticoid modulation, that's part of what they're doing, is they're pushing that. They're kind of deactivating some of that. Very popular supplement, or at least one that's emerged in recent years, is amodin. People have seen amodin come up for cortisol. That's kind of a deactivator, right? Deactivating a lot of that over into cortisone. So, I mean, that's all fine if you need it, right? But you really don't want to have, a huge preference one way or the other. There should be a balance. The body, if you're functioning fairly normally, what the body should do is, if you don't have enough cortisol, it should free more of it up out of that cortisone. So what you would see on that graph would be there's not enough cortisol production, so we're preferencing cortisol and not cortisone, right? Because we're trying to get the most effect out of that as we can. You would see, so you can get some cool data like that on the Dutch test. Here's the thing. I love the test. That's actually how I was introduced to this idea of circadian rhythm. I mean, a lot of my initial introduction into things like cortisone, 11 beta, and all this stuff was from a Dutch test, 2015 or so. My doctor at the time, this was a brand new test. I think it came out in like 2014-ish. He gave me the pamphlet, the packet that you take home, and you have like the strips that you pee on and all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
I was burnt. I was just burnt out, man. I was having a really difficult time. I had a lot of stuff going on. I think my house had just burned down.
Jeez.
I had to fucking move out of my house. Like, there's so much going on.
Talk about cortisol.
So long story short, he's like, dude, I want you to take this test. And I took it, and on the graph, my line was touching the bottom of the graph. It was like flat, cooked, smoked, just completely and utterly debilitated. And when I tell you that the best word I could use to describe that type of situation, and I describe this to clients, is completely apathetic.
Yeah.
Like, your stress resilience sucks. Like, everything pisses you off, but also you don't give a shit about anything, and you get no joy. You like derive no joy from anything.
You're mainlining caffeine just to feel something.
Nothing. There's no arousal response. Like, you could stand out in front. I got railroad tracks in front of my house. I could stand out in front of the train and I'd be like, probably should move, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That's,
I think it's funny because people are like, I have a cortisol problem, but they've never actually had a real cortisol problem, because I guarantee most people have never felt that feeling. I've never felt that feeling. So I couldn't tell you what that's like.
That was really rough. I think I had checked my, so at the time I'm wanting to learn about this, right? And so I'm like, I'm going to start adding fasting cortisol to my blood work, right? Easy thing. At the time, I think my fasting cortisol was like a 1 or 2.
Jesus Christ.
It's so bad. And
high score.
Yeah, it was bad. I've seen one other person with a 1 before. And I'm just like, how do you exist? How are you here? Like, how are you functioning?
Yeah, that's crazy.
At that point, it was bizarre because not only do you feel terrible, but you have all these sensory sensitivities too. So like sound bothered me, light, like I couldn't like drive. Oh, you know, um, I could fall asleep anywhere at any time, but I couldn't stay asleep because my blood sugar was probably moving all around while I was sleeping, it'd wake me up. And so it's like, dude, I just want to sleep. But, you know, so to your point, a lot of what I see is some mild elevations. I do sometimes get people that have more suppression, but generally by the time they get to that point, they have like half a dozen other things going
Yeah.
on that
Yeah.
are probably going to really take precedent as far as correcting them, which we didn't even talk about supplementation at all, because it's like
I have 2 questions left.
it's like one of the least important things.
Yeah. So my next 2 questions, because I want to be mindful of your time, and I have another call too. But the next 2 questions is like, what supplements do you think actually do move the needle for things like this? Like, what over the counter supplements do work for people, and then what how do I want to word this? How would you go about regulating cortisol for someone who is in a bodybuilding prep with the goal of getting inside out shredded?
Okay, so the 101 on supplements is there are outside of anything that improves your mood probably will help. That's very broad, but just think about it this way. And I'm not talking about stimulants. I'm not talking about stuff that's heavily, affecting your nervous system, but anything that puts you in a better mood probably will help decrease stress.
Makes sense.
Just say that. So if you are looking for more of an inhibition, so you're trying to bring this down, there is some data and also anecdotally, like, yes, some adaptogenic herbs can have minimal effects on that. Phosphatidylserine can sometimes have a positive effect on that. Also, things that have inhibitory effects that raise GABA, like theanine, maybe just GABA supplementation, they probably will indirectly help with that just because they are calming some of that anxiety. They are having that inhibitory effect. So in turn, you might see a lowering effect, or you might even see an increase if that's what you need, because again, it's a stress reduction. So I would stay away from a lot of things like ashwagandha, maybe like relora, rhodiola. I've seen hit or miss effects with those. Phosphatidylserine, I would probably stay away from those if you have very, very low levels. What I've seen work better there is a lot of the mushroom extracts tend to work fairly well there. So like your lion's mane and cordyceps and like reishi and stuff like that. Adrenal glandulars are probably the big heavy hitter that comes into play there. Most of them are like a bovine, adrenal glandular. There's a few supplements floating around that have those as well.
What about some basic like sleep ingredients that you'll see in a lot of the sleep aids these days, like magnesium, glycine, inositol? Like, do any of those with their regulation of like helping people move from sympathetic to parasympathetic have an effect on this too?
Yeah, so those are going to be really useful if you have a hard time winding down, if you train at night, right? If you train in the evening, train at night. So, shameless plug, I formulate for a supplement company, right? So like one of the things we did with our sleep product is it's very heavy in inositol and glycine and magnesium and things like that. So it's very much based on that type of thing. So actually one of the ways that I use it with a lot of people is a lot of my people that have to train close to bedtime is they use it at night because it brings them down so much quicker. So what I'll notice with them, and what I notice with myself too, is that my heart rate drop when I sleep, like my ring will track that. My heart rate drop is much faster. And my I get into my deep sleep or my REM sleep patterns a lot quicker right? It's not that I can't fall asleep necessarily, because if you're tired, you might still fall asleep. But
Yeah.
it's just that you're getting into a deeper sleep a lot faster. So in turn, you have a better quality of sleep. And what is that going to do? Yeah, it's going to regulate your cortisol for sure.
Yep.
I mean, they're
Good
not,
sleep. Imagine that.
yeah, they're not, they're not cortisol supplements
Right.
directly. It's just that they're putting you into a parasympathetic state. And so
The downstream.
you're
Yeah.
going to
The
feel,
downstream effects that it's having on everything else. Yeah.
you're going to feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Glycine, inositol, magnesium, and theanine was a game changer for me. Like as
Yep.
far as sleeping, and I have such an issue with magnesium, or not magnesium, melatonin. I have just such an issue with people taking melatonin, because it's like you're causing such an issue with a cascade of effects and then creating a habit forming thing. So it's like finding a product that didn't have melatonin that helped me fall asleep was absolutely huge. But we could probably talk about supplements for a long time, but again, I want to make sure that our times are good here. But what for someone in those last stages of prep where they're trying to get to those like next level condition type things? Other, like, obviously trend is the biggest thing that people will put in place in order to block that cortical receptor and that kind of thing. But what other things would you leverage in order to try and get them to that position where cortisol is low, that can get that inside out shredded look?
So if you don't have any data directly or historical data, and you don't know if you're high or low, you want to be careful with
Yep.
that. What I
Yep.
would say is that I would still be cautious of trying to really, really, really lower your cortisol, because you may already be bottomed out. So I would stick to mainly a lot of the ingredients that you're talking about here as far as mood regulations, because that's likely what's going to help you the most. Things like theanine, maybe 5-HTP. Another one I really like more recently is I use a lot of saffron extract with people fairly often. Check that one out. It's good. There's Afron is the trademark. There's a couple different trademarks. So it has some dopamine and serotonin reuptake inhibition, kind of like a lot of your pharmaceutical meds do. Obviously, it's not pharmaceutical. That's one of the few things outside of like theanine that I actually feel when I take. So mood, I would say that neurochemical and mood regulation at the end of that prep are very helpful. So yes, you probably would benefit from something like the product I was talking about earlier, or just single ingredients, magnesium, inositol, glycine, that also help with blood sugar, regulation at night, theanine during the day. That might be something like the saffron in the morning, maybe the mushroom extracts, maybe some tyrosine in there as well. I'm sure adaptogenic herbs are fairly benign. They're probably pretty harmless. You could use them. I just don't go too heavy on like the adrenal glandulars or the phosphatidylserine and stuff unless I know, because I've just seen too many scenarios where it's already really high or already really low, and you're like driving it one way or the
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. I think the most important thing for us to kind of close out with that part is like making sure that whoever you put in charge of your coaching isn't just giving you a protocol that someone else told them to run, right? Because like they just go, cool, at 8 weeks out, we add trend. Okay, why? What is the purpose? What are you seeking to do with that compound? What thing is it that what result are you looking to do? Or is it just you were told at 8 weeks out, trend goes in? It's like, well, that most of my preps in the last 3 years with athletes have, if any trend at all has been in place, it's been incredibly low with that thought process in mind. Is like, all we need to do is shift this a little, right? You need to focus on everything else that we're doing. Is like, I got to manage your nutrition right to make sure that I'm not beating the shit out of you too hard with food. But then we also have to make sure that we regulate everything else. Are you sleeping well? Are you getting your steps in? Are you relaxing at the end of the day? Like, those are the most important aspects to regulating a stress thing versus a product you can buy from Morphogen or Revive or insert whatever company you want. Like, that is probably your last line of defense. Would you kind of agree with that there?
Yeah, and I would take it a step further and say, do those things in the off season. And then you don't have to change much when you get in prep.
Yep.
Are you going to have some sleep irregularities at the end? Probably. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're not. Like, that's completely and utterly ridiculous. But yeah, probably. But you can definitely minimize those things by having those sleep and wake times set, by having those habits set, some of that basic supplementation. If nothing else, it'll affect you less, and might not affect you till you get to the really deep stages of prep. But it's just when people are going into those situations and they're already all over the place, like it's going to be a bad time.
I think we'll close off with this, but I think the most important thing to do here is to make sure that if you are going into a prep, that everything else in your life is as solid as it can be. Don't go into a prep with relationship problems. Don't go into a prep with monetary problems or work problems or all these things. Yes, things will pop up. But if you're putting out fires in every aspect of your life on everything and you want to go, let me prep for 12 weeks. It's like, yeah, you're cruising for a bruising on that one, man.
Good luck. Yep.
Yeah, right.
Totally agree.
Well, Austin, I really appreciate your time, man. I want to be mindful of it. I'm sure you have a couple other calls to knock out today, but I appreciate you a lot, man, because I feel like cortisol is one of those things that people just, like I said, they throw it out there like a smoke bomb. They throw it down. They go, your cortisol is dysregulated. And then it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? You know?
Yep.
But I appreciate you a lot, man. These deep dives, I think will help out a lot of people. And maybe sometime in the future, I can have you come on and talk about something else pretty deep.
Yeah. Whatever you want to chat about. I'm always game, as long as it's not anything outside of fitness and bodybuilding, because I don't know much about anything else.
Don't worry. I'm right there with you, man. I don't have enough bandwidth. Unless you want to talk about 5-year-olds, I don't really have too much else to go on there. I do fitness and I hang out with my son.
And you're probably just learning that one as you go.
Oh yeah, every day. But you want to plug anything right quick? Plug your Instagram. What's this supplement company that you work with?
Yeah, so I am co-owner, co-formulator of Pure Factor Formulations. That's the name of the brand. Everything that we formulate is very situationally applicable. Like all the stuff we're talking about, that's how we design, products. You would love the sleep product because it's exactly what you just said. So that, if you guys want to reach me for anything, Instagram's easy. Austin ST and the number 8 on Instagram. If you go to my bio, there's a link tree in there. My email's in there if you want to inquire. All my classes are in the link, everything's there. So just click that link tree.
Yep. And for anyone who wants to learn more, I would highly advise looking to Austin for mentorship. It's something that I did years ago. The thing that I've said a number of times is I didn't do well in college. I'm a C student at best. So like you're incredibly intelligent, but the way that you taught, like it just didn't mesh as well with me. So Dom Kuza, who I am with now, but whenever I talk to people about like, go find somebody who's really smart and knows what the fuck they're talking about, you and Dom are the two first guys that come to my mind. So I just want to say thank you for everything that you did for me back in the day. Of like, I still reference the things that we went over. So awesome. I appreciate that a lot, man. And the time means a lot to me. So I do appreciate that a ton, man.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. And anytime, I'm willing to come back.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you. Everybody who is still watching at this point, do the YouTube thing, subscribe, like, comment, share it with your friends, and we'll catch you on the next episode.